Dr. Ravi, thank you so much for joining us today. It is really a privilege for us, and welcome to the department, if I can say, Distance Education Department at CMC Vellore. Thank you.
It's an honor to be here. First visit to Vellore, so nice to be with you. Thank you.
I thought if you could just give us a brief picture of the ministry that you are involved in before we start with the topic for today.
Sure. We are described as Christian apologists. Apologetics comes from the Greek apologia, which literally means to give an answer.
Yes.
In the Bible, it comes quite often where people are confused or people are seeking clarification, people are looking for answers to specific questions.
Yes.
Peter talks about it, always be prepared to give an apologia, an apologetic,
Yes.
or the reason for the hope that is within you, and to do that with gentleness and respect.
Yes.
So the task of Christian apologetics is answering people's questions, both hard and soft ones. And our ministry is headquartered in Atlanta, Georgia. We are based in about 10 countries. We have about 130 on staff. We do it in 4 arenas. We do it in the academic, in the business, in the political, and the arts. These are the institutions that shape a culture. And of course, we're in churches and other arenas as well.
Yes.
But this ministry was founded in 1984. And so as we are taping now in 2013, it's 29 years after the fact. Yeah.
Thank you for mentioning that. And just to comment, if you don't mind, from my side, we have been blessed over many years, not just with the truth that you share, but also the way you share that. And so from our side, we just want to thank you for that.
Well, I want to thank you very much. That's encouraging, and we hope to continue, because we always remind the people or my colleagues that we are not just answering a question.
Yes.
We are answering a questioner. There's a person behind the question, and if you don't treat that person with respect, you do disservice to the question that is being raised. Yeah.
Well, thank you. Coming to our topic for today,
Okay.
I understand that there are many nurses, when they start their nurse education, the first lecture they have is on ethics. Now we know with doctors, they often refer to it or speak about medical ethics. But I was just wondering if you could share with us some of your observations regarding modern day medical ethics.
It's been a long and a tough journey for medicine. I think it is important for medical practitioners to have our sympathy that way, because all of a sudden intervention has different ways of bringing about either rescue or escape or whatever. And as new machines and new technologies and new methods come onto the scene, the patient will want to either find solution that way, and then others come with philosophical dispositions of what they want and what they don't want. We have things now not just like wills, we have living wills.
Yes.
And then we've got the capacity to abort children more and more sophisticated ways. There are all kinds of machinations going on in sexuality and all of that, and the medical practitioner and legal practitioners are right in the center of all of this. Medical ethics has become a tough thing, but here's what I'd want to say, Dr. Frederick, and that is this: medical ethics should be based upon the ethics of life itself. It is a particular category after it has answered general questions.
Yes.
C.S. Lewis, for example, said in terms of ethics, he said there are 3 questions that need to be answered when a person is in the high seas. He said, number 1, how can the ship keep from sinking?
Yes.
Number 2, that's individual ethics. Number 2, how must the ship keep itself from bumping into other ships? That's social ethics. He said those are the first 2 categories we address, individual ethics and social ethics. He said, but it all is based upon the 3rd question: why is the ship out in the high seas in the first place? And that's the question we don't want to answer. So if we want to talk about medical ethics or general ethics, situation ethics, social ethics, it has to all be based on answering the fundamental question: what does life really mean? What is its purpose? Only then can these subsidiary questions be answered. Otherwise, we are with our feet firmly planted in midair. So the question is important, but we must remember it's hinged upon some answers already given about life in general.
Now, some people become a little bit uncomfortable when you speak about ethics, even in the medical fraternity, because it's the impression given that when you speak of ethics, you are limiting us, you are controlling us, you are imposing on us. Would you like to comment on that?
You know, one can be nasty and respond by saying, does the doctor expect to be paid? You know, that is also an ethical question, yes, isn't it? Why is that not seen as an imposition? Doctors work under contracts, they work under monetary returns, they work under life-sustaining needs of their own. So to say that an ethic is imposed is correct. The question is whether the imposition is a legitimate, overarching worldview and not seen as some kind of a manipulation of the individual. I understand what the doctor says here. The fact of the matter is, as citizens of a country, we feel that. Is it ethical for us to be taxed the way we are? I'm an author, you know, and a large percentage of my income from books goes away to the government, and I say, wait a minute, you know, I do all the work, I do the research, I do the writing, and you
yes,
come and take more than half of it away. If the overarching legislation is submitted to, then we have to then deal with the irritants and the discomfort of how it applies to every profession. But this applies in education, this applies in law, this applies in medical practice, this applies in almost any kind of matter where licensing is approved. Medical ethics feels the nub and the rub the most because it deals with life and death issues.
Yes. Now, when we speak of medical ethics, there are often key principles people refer to. I'm sure you are aware of it. I think doctors are also used to using the term, speaking of maybe autonomy or beneficence or non-maleficence, etc., confidentiality, as some of the 4 key principles in ethics. Often they don't refer to what I like to add: veracity, truth-speaking, justice, and role fidelity. Being true and faithful in the role that you have in serving patients and the community at large. Now, having just glanced at those 7 principles, it's easy to speak about words and just say, well, those are medical ethics, etc. But sometimes, to me, it doesn't go to the core of the whole matter still. If you think of ethics and the core of ethics, you refer to a worldview. But what would you like to share with us as medical professionals? What do you see as the core, the heartbeat of ethics, and the ethics that are really to be advanced?
I appreciate that question, and it's very it's value laden right from the beginning, even in phrasing the question. You know, it's fascinating. My brother's a doctor. He's a surgeon in Toronto, Canada, and oftentimes he'd talk about the books he would have to read. I've got family members in law, and they
yes,
talk about the books they have to read and how exceptions are brought in to situations. I think the core of medical ethics is seen right from the beginning in the Hippocratic Oath. When you go back, you know, across the centuries and see the idea of veracity and truth, you see the idea of confidentiality right there in the Hippocratic Oath. You see right in the early days of the protection of the sacredness of human rights,
yes,
or the right even of the baby, how the very word abortive is used in the Hippocratic Oath. You know, that a doctor would not use an abortive measure in a woman's body, which
yes,
is fascinating, going back over 2 millennia. And then in 1964, the Hippocratic Oath is sort of rewritten and modernized in some way. But even while some of those words were removed, confidentiality remains, you know, efficiency, beneficence, all of those things remain. But I think your point is very well taken. What is at the root of all of these oaths? Why even take these oaths? And so first of all, let me say this right from the beginning. I've been the one benefited from medical practice over the years. I injured my back seriously in the mid-80s, and it changed my life completely. The surgeons who've operated on me, who gave me back the strength in my back and the ability to walk and all the techniques they used, where would all of us be today without medical practice and all that has come? Very grateful for this institution and our hospitals and the medical practitioners. I know what goes into the training, the hours and hours and sleepless nights, the sacrifice, the commitment, people going into the hinterland, into places where there's no monetary returns. Our society is greatly indebted to the medical practitioner. But the medical practitioner has to have a starting point. And the starting point is not why am I in this, but who am I dealing with? Who am I as a person? Who is the patient as a person? Unless we start from the sacredness of life in its essential form, then everything else becomes pragmatic and a cultural variant. Cultures will interpret this value differently. So where do we begin? We begin by the sacredness of life. I'm not a medical practitioner, but if I saw a person hit on the side of the road by a vehicle, my first response will be of rescue. What can I do to at least preserve this person till the expert comes along? Why do that when you don't know the individual? It is because we treat human life as valuable and human life as sacred. So for the medical practitioner, this is going to be the haunting question. Are we purely the random product of chance, or are we valued entities, sacred in the eyes of a creator God? That has to be the starting point, that God has created us. I'm valuable in His sight. From that, all other rescue methods will follow.
I'm so thankful for the way you word that. It's a blessing to me. What I hear you say are two things. The one is the value of a person, of his life. But more than that, the value of that person and his life because of the one who made him, our Creator God. And that links to me to some trends in family medicine. Increasingly over the last decade or two, they speak about person-centeredness or patient-centeredness as being better than doctor-centered care or disease-centered care. But though that is good in a way, that is not going to the final route, because it gives us a value for the person and centering on meeting the needs of that person. But you've said the value of life and the person because of who made God. And the challenge then, how to practice not just person-centered medicine, but Christ-centered, person-oriented medicine.
Absolutely. I think, Jesus was often referred to as the great physician. And when hymns are written on that, statements are made on that, when he saw the suffering, when he saw the sick, when he saw the broken body. And Jesus had a remarkable demonstration of it when a paralytic was brought to him. The friends dismantle the roof and lower the paralytic. The man can't move. And Jesus, in an astounding response, looks at him and says, "Son, thy sins be forgiven thee." And the people who brought him were quite upset about this. And Jesus knew why they were upset. He said, "I know what's bothering you. You really wanted to see him physically well, and you're surprised that I first dealt with his soul. But just so that you know that the Son of Man has power on earth to forgive sins as well." Then he looks at the man and he says, "Arise, take up thy bed and walk." He did both on the basis of the physical expression of his power. He used that to support the spiritual priority of the human being. That the problem of destructiveness of sin within our hearts. What is sin? Sin is ultimately the violation of purpose. We violate the purpose for which God has created us. And so he forgives the person for his wrong-headed life and all that went wrong, and then heals him as well, to show us that we are not merely physical quantities, we are spiritual entities. And that's the way Jesus always treated an individual. That the body is the temple of the living God, and that temple houses the very relationship you have with God. So we see the person as transcending matter, and that's the way the physician needs to see that person as well.
Thank you so much. I would like to just take a step in a slightly different direction, but still link with what we've discussed now. And that is about values-based education. nowadays there seems to be a trend towards that. Not just values-based education, but also values-based medical ethics. I don't know if you would like to comment on that. How do you perceive this trend towards values-based ethics? And maybe comment on why you say what you do.
You know, it's interesting. If I'm correct, philosophically, the first one to start using the term values in this way was the atheist philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche, the German. Moral reasoning and moral absolutes were replaced by values. It's like the whole study of theology in the West was replaced by the study of religion. Theology starts with God, religion starts with man. And so man-centered ethics and values replacing the objective moral framework of God is a very subtle shift. Values positions the person as the author of right and wrong. Culture becomes the progenitor of values, not God. So if we talk about values, we have to ask the question, what do we mean? What does values really mean? Is values pragmatic? Is it local? Is it cultural? Or are we basing it on an objective moral framework of what God gives to us on the sacredness of life, of conduct, of word, of the body, of sexuality, of relationships, of time, all of that. So values can become a very slippery slope if we do not find an objective point of reference. So this sort of the outcome-based education suddenly sort of gets this little twist of values-based education, and we have to ask ourselves the question, are these just words, or do we have a point of reference for values? That's the question that needs to be asked.
Yes.
Whose values? Yes. Whose morality? So it sounds noble, but we need to ask some questions before we define our terms.
Yes. And even if we say that we take God as our absolute reference, how do we find His values? Could you comment on that?
Yes, I think that's the question, Doctor. You know, if we say God, is that just an undefined term as well? The Bible tells us that Jesus talks to us that we are created in the image of God. And then when they take the 613 laws of Moses and ask him which is the most important law, which was a tricky question, Jesus said, you know, there are two laws. He didn't base one: to love the Lord your God with all your heart and all your soul and all your mind and all your strength, and to love your neighbor as yourself. He said, on these two laws hang everything from Moses and the prophets. So we have to ask, what does the revelation of God really say here in the Bible about the person of God and the values that He wants us to follow? Sexuality, family, personal holiness, truth-telling, time as a gift, the freedom of the will as sacred, love being the supreme ethic. All of these come from the pages of the scriptures.
Dr. Ravi, I think we need to conclude this interview already. Time flies.
Okay.
If in conclusion you could just maybe share with us, if it's possible, what would you consider as the main message on your heart for doctors in India?
Well, first of all, I think Indian doctors are respected worldwide. You know, they are playing such a major role because of their study, their discipline, their hard work. I want to thank people in the medical profession. We need you. We are grateful for you. I was in a hospital in Indonesia very recently, built by a friend of mine, where the patient had to be earning less than $1 a day in order to qualify to even get in. And what a beautiful facility that is. My challenge to the doctors is basically this: be a man or a woman of God yourself. Because if your life is not privately practicing the values of human life and holiness and guarding your own life and conduct, then you will become merely a practitioner and a professional. We want in medical practice more than that, those who are practitioners in their lives as well, and regard the sanctity of life and their own discipline. So I would say to them, treat every human being as a gift from God, as an entity that God has created. When you've got a patient in front of you, that patient is created in God's image. Just as the doctor would want his wife or his daughter or his son regarded with respect and dignity, so we treat every life. And life is conceived in the womb. If we do not respect life in the womb, the weakest of all human life, we will spiral out of control and ultimately desacralize everything. Life is sacred right in the womb, and I believe that's where medical ethics should begin. Let me just give you this illustration. The human life we have is full of suffering. Life is actually a protracted period of pain management. How do you deal with it? Okay, now here's what I want to say to you. Suppose we stand before God one day, doctor,
Yes.
and we say to him, why did you allow so much suffering in the world? What would we say to God if God were to say to us, you know what? I sent you millions of lives who had the answer to what you're asking me. Millions of lives who are going to be a solution to the problem, who are going to give you answers to cancer and to disease and to dementia and all of this. You wouldn't even allow them into your world, and you're asking me why I have brought so much of suffering into this world? Think of the lives we are eliminating, within which there could be the genius of answers to human misery. So every life is sacred, and I think doctors have that responsibility to treat that right from the moment of conception. And until we see life as valued right from the beginning, I think we will spiral out of control, and the vortex of pragmatism will suck us in. So thank you to the medical world, and my prayer for the medical world is that we will honor God in our practice in the way He has created us. And with that I say thank you.
Wow. Dr. Ravi, thank you very much for sharing with us. May the Lord bless you.
Thank you, Doctor. Appreciate it.